All right, so welcome back to the traveling tarot reader. You've been all over the world, I hear.
Yes, and it was fantastic. And I want to say thank you to all the YouTube people who stepped up and who hosted me so well in Hawaii and in the States. It was brilliant.
You should have
I
let me
had a
know.
great
You should have let me know. I would have hosted you.
time.
That would have been fun with
I
Hawaii in the
didn't get
background.
that far
Uh,
down. I
yeah,
sort of skimmed along the top, Portland, New York.
right. So what did you learn when you were away?
In terms of people and places and things.
Or anything for that
Yeah.
matter.
Well, I was very interested and met fantastic people in Hawaii, and these are cultural representatives and State Department and things. They've been fighting for sovereignty for decades because Hawaii was illegally annexed by the US in 1893. And it was acknowledged at the time. The president at the time said, "Why are we doing this? This is illegal."
Mm,
Okay. So there is a case to be made, and they've been fighting the good fight for decades now. So I
mm.
found that really interesting. Portland, I think, is a fascinating city. And people were sort of saying, oh, Portland used to be great. Now I don't know, because of all the footage, I think, during the BLM protests and stuff. But I found it to be very safe and clean and easy to get round. And then New York, of course, is New York.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting that well, I mean everybody knows this that the cities, West Coast cities especially, but New York is very blue. There are pockets of Republican support, but by and large, New Yorkers, tough
Yeah,
and hard as they are Democratic, and so
absolutely.
that's a
Absolutely.
little fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went to Buenos Aires, and it was really interesting watching how a country copes with 100% inflation.
Yeah. Good Lord.
And people work in a dual economy. You know, you have to survive. You have to have these things operating on two levels. But I had a fabulous time there. Yeah.
Mm. Nice. I've never been to South America, but I hope to at some point soon.
Oh, you must.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely will. So how are you keeping up with the current political environment? In that I haven't spoken with you for a while, and I think it's always good to get different perspectives on how
Yes,
people
sure.
are seeing this. And so, what do you make of the latest? You're tuning in, I'm sure, and this thing that's going on
Yeah,
now.
it's hard. There's these train tracks, isn't there, really? There's real happiness at seeing movement finally and Trump's name and senior players on legal documents. But there's this frustration at the same time that it's taken so long, and is it almost too late? And where to from here? Because it'd be one conversation if it was just those people. But the fact the GOP support them and are undermining the state institutions
Hmm.
to protect him is the problem.
Definitely, yes, it's true. It's true. It's true. It's just that I don't think they can stop this moving train because the it's a fact. I mean, they can use it as a political message that Biden is prosecuting Trump. No, the Justice Department and the special counsel is prosecuting, and I'm quite sure Biden is not on the phone talking to Jack Smith. Jack Smith is doing what he's doing.
No,
Yeah. So I
no,
don't think he's going to stop. I think he'll continue. And
yes,
yeah.
yes. And the problem is there's now huge millions of Americans who feel the FBI, that, all the institutions are against them, this deep state stuff.
Mhm.
And that's sort of ironic in a way for those of us who are active in the 70s, where we were saying the same thing about these institutions, but with considerably more evidence.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it
And
funny?
now they've sort of cleaned up their act, You've got the GOP going.
Right.
"Mm."
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is when you in the final analysis, it's a major test of the rule of law in the U.S. and no democracy can survive without some kind of strong rule of law. And I continue to be optimistic because for all the failings, the rule of law is moving along. And you
Yeah.
see Trump is getting indicted, the 16 people in Michigan who
Mm.
it's remarkable to me how these people think that they thought this was going to be okay. But this is what happens when you get a guy like Trump at the top.
Yeah.
He's kind of a
Yes.
fool and he inspires people to think criminally and foolishly and they follow
Yes,
along and they do
exactly.
this kind of thing, which is
And to think they're impervious to anything happening to them. That's what
right.
he conveys as well. Doesn't matter what happens, I can sort it out.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, now, aside from all the ones that are already in jail that were active during the insurrection, slowly but surely, more and more people are being ensnared in things that are illegal. I don't think you should be allowed to create fake papers and submit them to an election board. That's not allowed,
I
period.
think you'll find that's not on. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's so Mickey Mouse. If it wasn't such a powerful country, you just roll your eyes and go, oh, well.
Yeah, well, it's the test. The reason
It
I
is a test.
continue to be optimistic is that despite all the counterpoints, and there are a few, I'm not saying there aren't, this to me feels a lot like the U.S. crisis in that we're in that Civil War planetary period once again. But
Yes.
just remember who won last time. Keep your
I
mind
know.
that's the whole
Yes.
point. It was difficult. Can you imagine if you were living here in 1862 or 3, you would have thought this
Yeah.
is looking pretty bad. A lot of people are
Yes.
dying. What's going to happen? So,
Mm.
hold on. Let's see where it goes. To me, the
Yes.
metrics the metrics seem to be saying, if you look at numbers, it is not a hopeful picture for the GOP if you look at the
Mm.
numbers. Now, something could change. Now, this is where you come in. What have you been getting? What's your intuition tell you? When you tune in, does it feel like we're all going, over Niagara Falls, never to return? Or is it a little more hopeful?
No, it's funny. It's again this short term, long term thing. When I look long term, it looks fine. But
Mhm.
there's this really gnarly sort of time that has to be got through. And I think it's also important for every decent thinking, caring American, and we have a lot of them in our viewership, bless you all.
Yes, thank you.
You can't take your eye off the ball in this next 18 months. So I encourage people to take breaks, rest up, because it's really, really important not to leave it to everyone else. What can I do in my neighborhood, in my workplace, in my everything? And if you're a blue dot in a red sea and you can't do anything in your neighborhood and your workplace, do it online.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yes, it's a matter of staying you stay together mentally, and then in whatever way you take actions as well. Yes. Which
Yes.
now I'm surmising. My sense of this is that, especially if Trump gets the nomination, you will see more Democrats voting, not less. That's why Trump is not a good idea for the GOP. They're really not thinking straight
Yes,
because
exactly.
a negative
I agree
candidate,
with that.
yeah, exactly. So even though there's a fear of Trump, and it would probably be better to get rid of the guy, period, he is the easiest person to beat because he is so despised by the majority. Any poll that you
Mm.
see on anything meaningful always comes in 50s to 60 plus, thumbs down on Trump, down on,
Yes.
Trumpism, supporting women's rights. All these big issues that are in play now, Democrats are on the right side. So then you start to need a miracle if you're on the other side. And I don't like needing miracles to win contests. I
No.
prefer to be, on the advantage side where the numbers
Yeah.
support me. So that's really what it boils down to. But it doesn't mean
Mhm.
people should say, well, I don't have anything to do. The whole point is to show up and vote because as an example, in prior elections, had there been bigger victories, that gives you a bigger mandate. This is the whole point, that when results are too close, such as what happened even in 2020, because
Yes.
the gap was very big, but in the electoral college it was tight. And so then Republicans keep thinking, oh, maybe we have a chance because, Carrie Lake, that crazy woman,
Yeah,
only
why
lost
not?
by 20,000 votes. So maybe next time I can do better. I would say not, but people have to show up and vote, to defend
Yes.
yes, exactly.
And the other thing I'd encourage people to do is if you're a Democrat voter, try and make sure at least one other person in your sphere votes. It might be someone who's not registered, help them to vote. It might be someone who's registered, but they're saying, I'm sick of all this, I'm not going to vote. If you can get one other person to vote, you are doubling your vote.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah, that because now imagine now that if 1,000 people do that, it's 2,000 votes and so forth. Yeah, no, it's totally true. Totally true. Yeah, that's a
Spread
get
the
the vote out.
word.
Yeah,
Spread the word. Yeah. If
100%.
everyone did that, imagine.
100%. Yeah, that's totally
And
true.
it's not beyond the realms for anyone to help one other person over the line.
True.
I don't think that's a Himalayan task.
It's true. Yeah, I agree 100%. So is your feeling now when you this thing now with the Jack Smith, Trump and all that, has your sense been that he's brought to account, he's not brought to account? What's your sense of where this goes?
Yeah, it's I think, like you were saying, it's a very testing time for the system. And my sense is somehow Trump will possibly evade justice. I've never seen him behind bars. How much would I love to be wrong?
Hmm.
I think there would be a hell if it keeps going this way, and it's a real system, and he's held to account. I think there will be a situation where he's put in a facility or something like that.
Hmm.
But if you look at Trump, because they're not going to put an ex-president in Rikers.
So
I think just
what facility though? What facility are you
I
referring
think
to?
mental health. I think he'd have such a breakdown
Oh, okay.
that
Yeah.
he would be whisked away
Okay.
to a mental health facility. I actually think that's far more likely as an option. However, that is speculation and opinion. I think what is going to happen with this is the pressure as it goes up the tree, the pressure on those behind them is enormous. And people aren't that strong under pressure, when they've had soft lives, like a lot of these people have. So I think on the one hand, Jack Smith's going to do the job. The problem is what I talked about right at the beginning. If the GOP go, no, he's a political weapon and we can't trust the DOJ, that's massively problematic for the country, for the next generation.
Hmm.
So I think the real question becomes, will the GOP pull out at some point, pull its weight out from supporting this man? But if he's their candidate, they'll go to the wall. So this is the crunch, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but then now imagine that he is the candidate. Imagine they don't pull their support. They just decide, okay, we're going to follow this guy
Yeah.
off a cliff. So then, what do they do when they lose the election? It's a tough one now. He was able to do all those things in 2020 because he was in the White House. Doing that now
Yes.
is like what happened in 2001. Those terrorists got one shot at that. After that, it gets very difficult.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. That's how it is.
do you think that there are a lot of these guys now ready to rush the Capitol? I don't think so because they know you can, get serious jail
That's
time.
right. I
Yeah.
genuinely feel that you haven't got that, surging mass of flag wearing, gun toting maniacs willing to do it. I think they've seen this process of sentencing. That's them sort of out of the picture, if you like. The next thing is, what about all the states that think, oh, we'll just do a bit of paperwork here? They are now, being exposed. So they don't have that option either.
Right.
They're left with just having to process this, you know.
Right, right. Yeah, that's
And I think
exactly.
it will be a bloodletting. Hopefully they will lose, but it will be a bloodletting because they'll all blame each other. That's how it is, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, as long as I'm prepared for any kind of unrest, as long as it's not a GOP victory, that would be a disaster. You know, if the GOP
Yes,
would win. But
exactly.
any
And
other
not just
result,
because we don't like them. It's a serious risk because none of them have a public service mentality,
right, right.
right? They're just in it for what they can get. So it, you know, already it's hard to get any government to actually reflect what's going on in the ground because you've got so many people in between. But it would be a mega dangerous principle. I think also the donors are important.
Mhm.
Now, these big donors, now their goal is don't tax me, leave me alone, I want free reign, do. But that would be so destabilizing, a GOP victory in this. I don't think it'd be good for anyone, including business.
Right. No, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and there are, well, a telltale sign is the Koch brother, because they used to be brothers, but there's only one left.
Yeah,
And
one's
that
moved on.
the one Koch brother, he's spending tens of millions to get rid of Trump. He's not pro-Trump. So
Yeah,
the smart billionaires recognize that this is not a good way to go. It would
that's
harm
right.
everything. So in other words, it's a really big hill to climb for the GOP to execute this in the midst of real rule of law, because in 2020 that whole attempt was to negate the existence of any kind of
Yeah,
justice department, just turn it into a farce and start seizing voting machines and doing all kinds of crazy things. And even then, Bill Barr, you know, who was quite the crook attorney general, even he thought, "Pfft." I think Bill Barr thought, I think I'm going to go to jail if I go along with this guy, quite honestly.
and how dare he swan around the nation in the aftermath going, I knew he was mad and I knew this, I
Yeah, no,
knew that. And then he single-handedly undermined the Mueller report.
no, it's true. It's true. Yeah, yeah.
How dare he speak
I mean, you know,
ever
honestly,
again?
I mean, you know what my dream would be? My dream would be that the Democrats win the election in 2024, which I think they will, and then you assign. I think Merrick Garland wouldn't do this. I would put maybe Adam Schiff or some other person as Attorney General, and I would actually suggest to them as president, say, you know, maybe you should take a look at that Mueller report again and charge
Yes.
what is in there because there are actual charges. You know,
Yeah.
why does he get to not be charged with obstruction of justice is one of the most serious crimes
Yeah.
you can commit. It was all over that report, and it's never been
Yeah.
looked at. No.
And it was such a shame because it was in two parts. The first problematic part was Mueller himself not delivering a clear soundbite about all that work.
Yeah.
Remember, it was some double negative, like we didn't find that he didn't do anything or something that left you going,
If I
well,
could
what did
say,
you find, love?
if I
Ted,
could say,
I
you
said,
know,
love, what did you find? You
I
know,
remember that because he was scared to say he's a crook. Instead, he was saying, if I could say he's not a crook, I would say it, but I
I'm
can't say
sorry,
it.
you have 300 people working 24/7 to come up with this. You can do better than a mealy mouthed double thing. So he's was sabotage leg one, not intentionally. I know it's not his style. He did the job. However, why not have a spokesman? They should have thought about what can we say and what can't we say? What is the killer summation of this report? And if it's not his cup of tea, a lawyer should have done it, right?
Yes,
One.
yes,
Then Barr comes in like Mickey Mouse and goes,
yeah,
so I think Mueller bears some responsibility
yes.
for not having that killer summation.
Yeah, well, and the only thing is then you look at all this and you think, okay, so one angle is what happened, which is true. The other way to look at it, though, if you look at it from way up above, so to speak, and you realize the universe is in this pattern where it's inevitable we're going to have stress and tension and division and all these things because of the cycles and so forth, then from one angle, the country needs to go through this in order to reach the other side, whatever that is. And from Trump's angle, I always felt when this guy entered the White House, I remember the vision I got is he just got into a labyrinth and he'll never get out. What he just did here
Yeah.
will
I think
cost
that's a
him
good
everything.
visual.
Right, but I mean, look at where he is. This is a really tough situation. Yeah, he might get away, but I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. It's not cool at all. Multiple indictments. What's going to happen if they lose the election in 24, as I think they almost certainly will? He needs to leave the country, or he's going to end up in a really bad place. Or, as you put it, maybe his mind cracks, because that's in his chart too. His chart shows health problems that could result in something going wrong pretty badly.
And speaking of health problems, if I could throw this back to you, Andre, about Biden's chart going forward, 2004 and beyond, because I am really worried about that.
2024 and beyond?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Biden.
Yeah, well, he does. Biden has some health pressure, but first of all, it's not as dangerous as Trump's, number one. And number two, my sense would be that it's post the election more than prior to the election. I mean, the only
That's
thing
what I mean. I'm actually worried about that. That
about
he'll, have the election, let's say Biden wins. 4 years, you need a dynamic person with vision leading the country in this very vulnerable time. And so that throws the spotlight onto the vice president.
you don't like her.
If you decide to go with a geriatric president, you better have a star as vice president, ready to just slip in if needed. And I don't feel Kamala Harris is that star.
Well, there I beg to differ because her chart is looking.
Please.
Her chart looks really, really strong, both at election time. In fact, I even at one point thought, gee, this is like there could be something that some crazy situation happens where neither Biden or Trump are on election night.
Yeah, I can see that.
But Kamala's chart is looking really strong in November of 24.
Oh, thank you.
That's suspicious.
Now I can sleep at night.
And moreover, the Saturn, when you see a person's Saturn at the top of the chart, the zenith, the midheaven, that's when they're typically in power, in a position of authority, and that's where it is for her. And when you pair that with the rising, the ascendant is being crossed by Jupiter. That's ideal for that kind of thing. So she's at her strongest, at her most, at her best, and at the place of responsibility. So, and Kamala, I think, is getting a real bum rap because the one thing Biden did to her that I think was a bit rough is to put her on the border. The border is the most impossible problem to solve.
It's intractable.
There's no way. Yeah, it's intractable. So, but other than that, she's a prosecutor. She's more than capable. And my feeling is that the U.S. will never elect a woman until they see how a woman performs in power. And so, to me, if she became the de facto president, I have no problem with that. I'm totally happy with her. And, don't forget, she's going to be advocating for women. And this is a big, big topic in the U.S. right now. Women are extremely upset at what's been happening with the Roe v. Wade, the whole thing. And you never want...
Yeah. I just saw yesterday a lot of states, maybe 13 states or something, are looking to have new laws to track people crossing state lines for help. This is the follow-up of Roe v. Wade. Yeah. What? Americans tracking other Americans that you drive over the border and you go to a clinic. What? Is it the 1960s or what?
Yeah, no, all of this is true. And yet, to my sense, to my understanding, it's the last throes of a dying way of doing things. They're trying to do something that has no way of, there's not enough traction for that kind of thing to last. The world today doesn't support this kind of thinking, and you can do it for a while, but it's really difficult to maintain. And so my feeling is that's going to change, but unfortunately in political terms, it always takes years instead of weeks or months. It's just the way the system is, right? People get impatient. I don't know what to tell you. Look back at so many problems we've had over the years with different things. if you had been in it, you would have realized, wow, this is lasting so long. When you look at it in history, you say, oh, it was just 5 years, and then it changed.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
then
It's done. It's so
and it was
true.
done. Yeah, right, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, think about how a lot of the demographics around what is causing this problem. It's older Americans, white, uneducated, disaffected Americans, by and large, the biggest group. That group is moving on, and the generation that follows now, the millennials, the younger crowd, they're not pro this kind of thing. They're totally against it. They
No,
find it offensive.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I heard them referred to the other day as Milzies,
Millennials,
millennials.
Gen Z
I
and
like
millennials
that.
together. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, but if
Yeah.
they vote, that's another factor. If they vote, then the odds again become very problematic for the GOP because in large numbers they vote Democratic, by and large.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of that dynamic, if I could ask you, Andre, what's your vibe on the Hispanic vote, particularly in the southern states?
The Hispanic vote in the U.S. election.
Yeah.
I haven't studied that all that closely. I know that they've made inroads, the GOP has made inroads into their vote. I know that.
Mhm.
But I don't know that they've made enough inroads in that vote to counter all the problems they have with other votes. So, for example, maybe you see an uptick of some points in that particular vote and a corresponding downtick or worse in, say, in women's votes, for example, because that area is so much more sensitive to what is going
Yeah.
on. So I don't think it'll be the vote that would take Trump over the top or anything like that. He doesn't
No.
have numbers like George W. Bush had, by the way. Even at his height, George W. Bush was getting in the 40s, really high percentage of
Yes.
Hispanics. Now it's lower and it's a little higher, let's say, than it was.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a bit. I have to say it's disturbing because I often think to myself, why would you back a guy like this? What possible reason would you
Mhm.
have for backing someone who is so clearly immoral and corrupt and incompetent, totally incompetent? But there you go, right? This is. I mean, I'm sure in Australia everyone is laughing at our, at America. I would imagine, right? Or no?
We've stopped laughing.
Now you're
It's now
crying.
a big concern, you know.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, yes, we had a very strong separation of church and state. And America's never really had a very strong separation of church and state. It might have in high legal land, but on the ground, not so much. And so we used to go, oh, it didn't matter if it was the Academy Awards or the World Series. I thank God for this victory, like we'd go, what language are they speaking? We just didn't get it. And now we've got the right-wing churches and these populist sort of Hillsong things and stuff going on. But I think a viewer pointed out to me a slogan, and I think it's critical going forward, which is, I'm not American, but I'm going to use the pronoun. It's our country, not your church. Now, I think that is brilliant. Good slogans tell a whole lot in a few words, and I think that's a brilliant slogan. So anyone who listens to this, please make your own T-shirt, spread the word. I think it sums it up really well.
Yes, it's true. It's true. It's true. And again, the numbers would point to the majority is more secular. It's just the
Yeah,
way it is. And so
it's just
again,
about
you're
the number.
fighting a losing battle because if you're thinking, well, they don't think progressively because they're not progressive, but the idea of thinking ahead, let's just say use the word ahead, you would be thinking we're losing numbers here. So we should be lining our thinking, our policy with the way people are likely to think. And in the modern world, it's impossible to hold that kind of perspective. It just doesn't hold. It doesn't hold.
Yeah,
This is like the Vatican not adapting to modern times. And are they
yeah,
wondering why they're losing attendance? It's because of that.
yeah,
You've got to bring in,
yeah,
why
yeah,
is it that here we are and yes, you see some women in the church, but there's still, in the back of the room, so to speak. That's not good thinking.
Exactly. And using that analogy of the Catholic Church, celibacy, which was introduced hundreds of years after the church, now they can't get any priests, and
Yeah,
they're mystified.
yeah,
What?
yeah. No, it's true.
You know,
It's true.
so
It's true.
they're losing people out the door, and they're not getting priests in the door. If you
Right.
can't attract a priest, how are you going to attract a congregation?
And if you think about it, if you just think logically, and I think it's a good idea usually to think logically, so that would be that if anything, you would make a rule that a priest must be married. Why? Because he's giving people that are married advice. How does he know anything about marriage if he's not married himself? It's not possible. So that would be a way to say if you believe in the institution of marriage, that people would do better in a family and so forth, then have priests that are married so they can speak to the truth from the perspective of being there, not some young guy or whatever.
The Greek Orthodox have a really clever way around it. So if how does it work? So if you're unmarried as a young man and you want to join the priesthood, you can, and if you do that, you can never marry. However, if you're married, you can join the priesthood. So like the vast majority get married, then join the priesthood, right? And so it's like a token nod to the old way, but leaves this huge door open. And so most are married men. Great idea.
Interesting. See, and this is where the Catholic Church isn't catching up. But it's this sense that just like in business, you can hold ideas, the ideology up to a point until you realize this is just not going to work. The world environment does not support it. There's too much information flowing around. There are too many competing points of view. You need something that attracts people without hemming them into something that feels like you're in the 12th century, because we're not in the 12th century. We're in the 21st century. I'm sorry, that's just how it is,
Yes.
It's the truth.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And by the way, part of it.
Yeah,
sorry. No, I was just going to say really quickly, part of it is that a recent planet that was discovered, and planets work this way, when they're discovered, they correspond to something. So 2005, that whole controversy around Pluto being demoted is a female warrioress that is advocating for women. You can see the rise of women in the last 20 years. It's obvious. You're resisting something you cannot resist. Women will be in power. Women will be advocating for themselves. It's a total waste of time. And running businesses and churches and anything excluding women is a bad plan, plain and simple.
Yeah. Simple as that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think because as women got more rights and things, men changed. Most men want to see their sisters or their wives or their cousins or their daughters having a life.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
And lest we forget, I'm old enough to remember before second wave feminism. So women could be basically nurses or teachers, and you had to resign when you got married. And women could not have bank accounts in their own name. They had to be signed off by husbands or fathers. It was, and we point fingers at the Islamic world and go, oh, how backward are they? But let's do it in Georgia. No, Islam is diverse, just like Christianity is diverse. It's not a fundamental premise of Islam to suppress women at all. It's just how people have taken it in this extreme way. And that's exactly because we're talking fundamentalism here. Islam is a very peace-based religion, but you have the fundamentalists who are problematic, no matter what their religion. And my issue is with fundamentalists.
Precisely. I agree with you 100%. That's exactly it. Because Islam, the word Islam, that's actually salam, or it's the idea of peace. And peace, you would say peace and happiness is our deepest nature, all of us, as one being. So any religion that points in that direction is the right religion. But so does the Catholic religion through prayer, etc. They're all the same in that sense. But then they get hijacked and used by people for other reasons. I mean, certainly in the US is a total scam. This whole thing with religion, most of these people that talk about religion, they're not religious. Look at Trump. He was saying, reading the Bible and saying, how was that? How did that joke go that he said, I forget what it was, but he didn't know the passage. And I mean, he was sounding like
Yes,
a fool.
yes, yes.
And yet
No,
the
he
people,
never darkened the door of a church. But
yeah,
the evangelicals were prepared to overlook all that bad, crude, vulgar behavior because the judge. This is part of the problem with fundamentalism too. You don't have to look at climate change because God will take care of it. There will be the rapture and it'll all go to hell in a handbasket. So we don't have to think about that. The same with Trump. In that sense, he was sent to us by God. Who are we to question?
oh
And
my
so
God.
it's this deluded state.
If God sends Trump, then I'm immediately declaring myself an atheist. That's the end of it. I'm sorry. There's just no way. Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it too, it's the logic that, that parable or metaphor where somebody's drowning in the ocean and he's praying to God to save them, and a helicopter comes and he says, no, I'll wait for God to save me. And eventually he drowns. And when he gets to heaven, God says, well, how many helicopters did I have to send? So the point is that this has to happen on the earth plane. But if you just say, well, I'm not going to do anything about climate change, how do you think this works? That God puts his hand? I mean, you need human action through the inspiration of God to take care of climate change, meaning, using less gasoline, whatever, less, pollution. But it's done by humans. God isn't. That's how it works. But there's no way to talk to these people. It's very simplistic. No, but it's because, though, bottom line is, it's what the leaders say. Are you surprised that suddenly everyone seems corrupt and insane? It's because Trump has basically hijacked a big section of the populace, and he is like that. So all of a sudden, it's normalized to committing crimes, especially in the open. He seems to be saying, well, if I rob a bank in daylight in front of everybody, that's okay because I did it in plain daylight. No, but it's not
And
okay.
the shocking thing is he was right.
So far.
Yes, I don't think the lasting position, but he was absolutely right. If I shot someone in Fifth Avenue, the famous quote, people just stepped aside because I've maintained from the beginning, it's not Trump's fault, America. No, he was always the clown. He was always the criminal. It was the response to Trump that let the country down.
Yes, it's true.
Right?
It's true. It's very true.
It would be like replacing Trump with George Santos. Not Santos's fault. He commits crimes every day as soon as he wakes up till he goes to sleep at night. Not his problem. It's how people deal with them.
It's true. It's true. Although, to be completely fair, his presidency was a GOP presidency, and he was being helped and defended. And case in point is, how was it not clear that in 2019 he was extorting Zelensky? He was committing an act of extortion and doing something that was impeachable. Right. But Liz Cheney acquitted him then. It was in 2020 when she saw how far that went. Then she became angry. But I thought to myself, Liz, you were there. You were letting the guy off the hook. Why didn't you, like Mitt Romney, say, no, this isn't cool. You can't do this. Phone, some guy in another country. And he was clearly trying to look for dirt. So was Giuliani.
Yeah,
clear as a bell. So a lot of these people, like Barr, like how you said earlier, Barr, during the presidency was a total crook. Then he changed his mind. I feel that he realized the rule of law is still too strong for this, and I don't think I want to touch this. I'm out.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So for a long time, they helped this guy. And that's what kept him going for 4 years, because people are always saying he gets away with everything. Start counting from 2021 when he left office. It's been 2 years.
Yes.
2 years in the legal system is nothing. I see petty criminals, they get caught. I've seen these shows where they'll say, look at this guy, he's committed all these crimes. They have all the evidence. It's 2002. Then they say he went to trial in 2007. And then I think,
I know.
5 years? What was he doing for 5 years? The system can be very slow. So from that vantage point, it's actually moving quickly. If you look at it as 2 years. It could have been a little faster, though. I'm disappointed in Merrick Garland because apparently he wasted a lot of time, twiddling his thumbs.
Well, also for me, it's not as though it was an unpopular or difficult presidency and stuff, and then there was this, therefore they have to do it carefully. They saw what happened to Mueller. They saw what has unfolded. They must know how critical this is for the country. Wouldn't you be saying we could get him for this, but let's target this and do it?
True.
You know.
Yeah, 100% true. Although you can see where this is the weakness in Democrats. When Biden won the presidency, he was still under the illusion that the fever would die down. But once they let Trump off the hook and they didn't convict him, which would have prevented him from running ever again, the fever didn't die down. And then there's Garland in the background trying to be bipartisan and not look like he was putting his thumb on the scale, which meant he wasted a year when he should have been from day one. He should have been sending a special counsel. Like Jack Smith should have been February 2021, right on the spot. Go look at this. Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
And January 6th, the review of that, I'm sorry, should have been 12 weeks.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's true.
Whatever you've got in that 12 weeks, go with that.
It's true. It's true. But
there's no point being really, really right 2 years later, because we all know just generally in life, outside of politics, everyone's brain span is reduced to a caterpillar and everyone moves on. One. The other thing is, and this is a real phenomenon, unfortunately, because you've let this person keep going and walking around, you assume you can make a case it can't be that bad,
right,
or they would have done this.
Yeah,
okay?
that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
So it's a double whammy.
Very
it's
true.
Actually 2 nails in the coffin of democracy to try and just be really fair and balanced and do things as they always are done.
Very true. Very true. And it's also true. Look back to the Watergate scandal and a lot of those, not Nixon, he was, pardoned, but
Parliament, Mitchell and Dean, yeah.
that whole crew, it took a while to put them in prison. They were in trouble and it was quite a journey. It was the late 70s before anyone was doing any prison time. So it's a slow process. And the other thing that's interesting though is that in the astrology, Trump's problem really expands and becomes more complicated and more dangerous starting this March, which is exactly what happened. Around March, Saturn's entering into Pisces, and you saw Alvin Bragg, and then things just, in fact, we were hearing in February already, there's something happening and so forth. March starts, and then the indictment started to happen. And Trump's situation legally, if he makes it that far, because I do concur with your surmising that he might end up in some loony bin somewhere and not have to deal with it, but it doesn't matter to me that way. But between now and 2027, the whole time it's really bad for his legal problems. So anywhere in there, he could go down, Anyway.
Yeah, and I also think, like you're saying, really, he's not going to have a good day from here on in.
Oh yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Like, there's other cases piling up, while we're looking at this.
Right.
So he's going to spend his life in a courtroom.
Yeah. Momentum. Momentum. The Cassandra Crossing, that movie where the train is going toward the bridge. It's the idea that something's moving and you can't stop it. And when you look at what's been happening to him the last year, nearly everything is snake eyes down. Like he'll try something. No. E. Jean Carroll. Oh, I'll defame her again. She sues. The judge says, yeah, okay, I'll give you more money. Yes, you can. I mean, all of it is negative. So life is really resisting him now. It used to be that.
Yes. He used to be on the wave, a very long wave.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is the thing. Yes, could it reverse miraculously and suddenly he's saved? Yeah, but I wouldn't bet on it. Don't put your money on that.
No, me either.
No, which is the thing. But in the meantime, yes, we're all in pins and needles. We're all wondering what happens if, do you feel like someone like Joe Manchin or RFK or any of these figures could become a problem for the election?
Oh God, I hope not. But of course they could. And excuse me, the problem with that is obvious. Splitting the Dem vote would be catastrophic. Not worried about Manchin. He could throw his hat in the ring and get his 143 votes from his cousins and his mother. Kennedy's a problem because of the cachet of the Kennedys. He does represent, I think. I would hope someone gets in his ear, because he's grown up in the most elite family in the universe. So not this year. Don't do it this year, Robert, please. Go for 2028, give it your best shot, do whatever you like, but do not do this. I would hope that would prevail, because it could be just enough to siphon off the differences. And I'm not even game to pull cards on it.
No, the thing about him, though, I think, and I may be mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Manchin's the rumors around Manchin relate to running as an independent. RFK is challenging Biden for the nomination, which is not going to work. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, and hopefully he'll just go home and put his feet up after.
Oh, I see. Because you think he might. Okay, you think he might. Right. Yeah. His chart. He's got a really good flow until about the middle of next year, and then it changes. Right. So I suspect he'll likely just go away and disappear into the background.
Yeah, that's my vibe too. I have to say.
Yeah.
He'll flame out.
Yeah. And the thing about it is too that there are a couple of markers that are very interesting. One marker is that it seems like almost everyone anticipates 2025 to be a year with unrest and difficulty. It just doesn't make sense to me. If Democrats lose the White House, Democrats aren't the ones that start making noise.
They're going to rise up. No,
that's one thing. The other thing is there's this astrologer that did this clever, really good research, and yet he's very pessimistic. He thinks Trump might win, and he thinks that's possible. And yet he did his research, and he found that the last time Saturn was in Aries, which is what's going to happen in 2025, the last two times that we had gun legislation implemented, which makes sense because Aries is the sign of firearms and Saturn is that which imposes rules. So do you think that the GOP is going to impose any kind of gun legislation? No, that doesn't make sense. No. So then you can surmise.
You'd have to think it's them. And right. I think it's such an issue that's unique to America. My offering in this conversation is have a referendum. I don't think America's big on referendums. Very explicit, just the things, firearm safety training, you have to be 21, mental health check or whatever your minimum bar is. Because polls keep saying 70+% of Americans want gun control.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think the only way to get around, because if you just impose it, however sensible it is, you're going to get the Waco reactions, right?
True.
Whereas this way, the people get to speak en masse.
True.
And if it fails, it fails. The country seems okay with 12,000 Americans being killed every year by other Americans. And I think that number's actually obsolete. I think it's higher. Well, obviously, assault weapons would be on the top of my list. Mm-hmm. We do not need assault weapons. But I think a referendum that was well run, well backed, is the only way you can break this nexus of madness.
It's true. No, I agree. And I mean, you could even, as a gesture to the so-called, the minority, in that sometimes with referendums, like what happened with Brexit, the UK leaves Brexit now they're having second thoughts, but they left with a very tiny majority, 51. So you kind of wonder, geez, like what if they revoted the next day? So maybe 55, 45, like have a little bit of room.
Oh, exactly. Please do not think I'm a fan of referendums. I will get to Australia in a minute. Exactly. Yeah. That's always a risk. Some countries have it. It has to be a clear 10%.
Right. Yeah, 55, 45.
The Scottish referendum kept coming in close. Brexit was really close, etc. I am not a fan of it. I just think it's the only path for America in relation to this issue.
True.
What else are you going to do? right?
It's true. It's
We've
true.
got a referendum coming up in Australia in October. It's a really fundamental issue, acknowledging that Aboriginal people were there first.
Right.
Okay, you wouldn't have think that's particularly contentious.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part is an Aboriginal advisory body to Parliament. No power, no teeth. It's symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
Our Prime Minister launched the idea in March, then didn't have the answer to the questions because people were saying, well, what's in it? What's the thing? Oh, we'll get back to you. No, because there's nothing wrong with those two statements.
Mm-hmm.
But they left this vacuum for Sky News and the far right to fill for 3 months before they came up with it.
Right.
Fatal, absolutely fatal. People like my brother think it's going to be the end of parliamentary democracy in Australia. You know, it's so damaging.
You mean, are you saying that your brother, why? Because you would the referendum would be voted down? What is his?
The no vote is winning as we speak. Inconceivable. When it was first launched, it was 70% yes. It's just gone down because it was badly handled.
Yeah, see, this is the thing that it's that uh, sense that you have to message. Which, by the way, this is what the GOP lives on, and Trump and the GOP, it's all messaging. So there's no substance at all. But you do need messaging because if you don't say anything, then the other side says things, and then they begin
That's
to affect it.
exactly what has happened here. What
Exactly.
should have been a walk in the park is now dividing the country.
Yeah, it's a fact.
And
Yeah,
then the right use that and say, see, anything about Aboriginal people divides Australians.
that's so
And
that's so awful.
you just go, oh my God. Whereas my original proposal that this could be a pathway for America still saying, let's just say it screws up and doesn't happen and it doesn't get across the line. You're no worse off than you are now.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Although
Right.
I'll tell you,
And there's a sporting chance there's enough people with
that's
a
right.
functioning
That's right.
neurone to push it over the line.
I mean, in a way, it's happening already in that in the U.S., what tends to happen is the blue states do their referendums, or they call them citizens' initiatives. And so either the government in that state, like the state I live in, has pretty strict gun laws, and there are all kinds of progressive laws here that have been approved by the citizens. So then, in due time, other states follow because it's like how you were saying earlier. You can have a state pass a law saying they'll watch you if you travel to get an abortion and crazy things like that. But how long will that last? In any environment when you're surrounded by blue states where there's a more liberal approach. This is the problem, though, that if you live in Alabama, you might have to wait till 2030 or 2035 before things are better. But even so, many states are already implementing these rules. So it's
and others are loosening them up so that minors can just go and buy a gun and shoot up their school on their way home.
Yeah, I know.
So, I
know it's pretty bad. I mean, right
it's
now,
demented. It's truly demented stuff.
It is. I know.
This is not freedom. This is not tolerance. This is insanity.
Yeah. But can you imagine, though, if the U.S. tried to do what Australia did and ban weapons outright and collect them all? I think you'd have a civil war. I don't know. I just have a feeling.
Exactly. But it's hard for the gun toters to argue with a 75% citizens initiative. They will, but you know what? It would carry it,
It's true. Yeah, you make a really good point. I mean, imagine if probably Biden won't do this. Perhaps the next president, some president who says, if you elect me, I will run a referendum and I will ask these questions. And whatever the questions, whatever the answer is, that's what we'll do. We'll pass it because the
nothing
majority.
To lose, everything to gain.
Exactly, right. In a lot of ways, the big topics should go to a referendum to allow people to.
Yes and no. Look at Brexit, which is a complete dreadful, dreadful thing. And watching it unfold right from the beginning, the lies that were told, just like the Hillary stuff and everything, it was Cambridge Analytica in both cases, poisoning the well in the US, poisoning the well in the UK.
It's true. Yes.
And now Britain has just come out I think it was just in the last week. The economy is falling faster than it has in modern history. It's not going to have a bottom because Brexit itself is fundamentally unsafe and crazy.
Yes, that's true. I read that. I read that. And, the only thing I can think of, though, is that when we look at the entire world, the competition to, let's say, the American, European model, Australia is part of that too, the Western modern world would be China and, say, Russia, but they're even worse. They're in terrible shape. So then, in that sense, it's not so bad in that they're supposed to be the replacement empire. I don't see that. They're having a lot of problems, including that apparently they're not, they don't have any immigration and they're not producing enough people. So that's going to create.
The whole one-child policy was so ill-conceived,
Right.
not
Unintended consequences.
questions for another day. We've got a million questions for another
I know
day.
that's the unintended consequence. You think you're solving a problem and you create an even bigger
Yes.
problem. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as usual, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to the next one. Let's talk soon, maybe next month or the month after that.
Sure. Don't let it go so long. We'll
Are you
get
traveling anywhere, or are you on the
back.
continent?
Yes, I am, but I'll tell you about that off camera.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds great. Till next time.
Yeah.